I'm Patty Blinderman, and welcome to the ADHD Friendly podcast. I am a professionally certified ADHD coach, and I support clients to work on ADHD friendly strategies and systems that create more ease in their lives. And I bring some of those here and share them with you in the hopes they do the same in your life. Today, I'm doing episode 88, and I'm going to kick it off with a celebration related to boundaries. And then I have an ADHD friendly tool I'm going to share called Sketch Notes. And my main topic for today, reading. So I'm going to be talking about summer reading, and I'm going to share some research on why reading is down, the reading levels are down, and how to support you to read a little bit more this summer if you would like to do that. And then as always, at the end of the podcast, I'll share some highlights of what's coming up next week. But let's jump in with the celebration. So I am celebrating that I put a boundary around not watching any news in the morning a couple of months ago. And I've been sharing that. My assistant's here with me to help me record this podcast. And she's nodding because I've been sharing how that has really worked to give me time in the morning to focus on things I want more of. And it's also protecting my energy because watching the news was really draining. So what I've intentionally replaced watching the news with is reading. And because I do it every morning, I have my coffee, I sit down and I read, I've been able to enjoy the structure of that time. And I've been reading much more because of it. And so I've told you about the Mina Lima Harry Potter illustrated books, which I just discovered. I did not know that they were a thing. So I read both 1 and 2, which are the 2 that they have completed so far. And then I also read the Mina Lima Harry Potter design book, where they talked about all of the different graphic arts that they created for all of the Harry Potter movies. And that was fascinating. Cool. And then it just has continued on from there. So now I'm reading Harry Potter 3 from the Jim Kay illustrated, the very large, I think of them as like coffee table books. There's 5 of those. And so I just kind of went from the Mina Lima first 2 books to Harry Potter 3, which is The Prisoner of Azkaban. And I'm reading Jim Kay illustrated from that. And I just love it. It's a whole different way to interact with the books. Even though I've read them dozens of times, it's in a lot of ways fresh and new because there's different illustrations, and the Mina Lima books have all these different interactive, like little pull out and pop up things. And it's just really fun to kind of turn the page and realize, oh, there's a new little thing I get to engage with. So I'm loving that. And I'm loving how much more time I have to read because I gave up something that wasn't working for me, which was the news. And then that leads me, my ADHD friendly tip is also something to do with reading. And it's something called sketch notes. And sketch notes are a way to take notes in a visual way. And so I made a little sketch note to show you what it is. Have I told you what sketch notes are before? So I drew a little sketch note. So if you're listening to this, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel, ADHD Friendly Podcast, to see any of the visual examples I'm going to be sharing. And so I literally did a little sketch note. So if you take handwriting and you add in visual elements, you get sketch notes. And what I really want to highlight here, and it's what I share whenever I am teaching a course or working with a client and introduce this concept, you don't need to be artistic in any way, because I'm not. This is literally as good as my drawing gets. It's just a way to take little icons, little sketches, and add them to your handwritten notes to make them easier to connect with and a visual way to hold on to the information more easily. And so I wanted to share how I did that in this book, Self-Reg, which I highly recommend. This is a great book. But I wanted to just share an example of how I use it in a nonfiction book. I typically only use my sketch notes in nonfiction books where I tend to write and highlight and mark them all up. And so if I just highlighted in the book, that's better than if I did nothing, right? Because if I read the book, but I didn't highlight anything, I have to go back and I have no idea where the thing is that I want to remember was. So if I highlight it, then I can go and just kind of look through the highlights and see, oh, what did I find was important in this? Sketch notes takes it a step further. Sketch notes gives you even more information, and it's visual information. So I'm just going to show you here again. I'm holding this up for you to see. A star for me means it's something that I really found interesting or something I want to remember. And then a little pencil, when I draw that, it's something that I want to draw out. So here it said reframing your perception of a child's behavior. So you can distinguish between misbehavior and stress behavior. And then down here, I even drew a little quick sketch of reframing, which again, it just made it more solid in my brain as I was processing this information. But it also helps me to go back and remember it's taking one picture and turning it into reframing it to look at it a different way. And so the little sketch just helps me to hold on to it and make it more easy for me to access in the future when I come back and look at my books that I've read. So I just wanted to give a little overview of that. I plan on doing a deeper dive into sketch notes in a future episode, but right now I just wanted to introduce it and invite you to explore if you were going to just use a couple of sketches. What you use, another example I'm just going to share really quickly is I love to even just add little quotes. You can see right here. So if there's something in here I was reading, but I want to pull the quote out, I put little quotes in the margin over there to remind me that there's a quote in here that I want to pull out. Again, it's just a simple way for me to glance and kind of flip through and recognize the different symbols in my notes instead of having to read everything and then make decisions again about why I highlighted it. So sketch notes can be really helpful. If you try them out, I'd be really curious to hear what your experience is and how it works for you. And then I wanted to share one other example of how a lot of people take sketch notes and either use them to summarize like a chapter or an entire book. And this person, because I shared a Harry Potter related, the things I'm reading because of my structure around my mornings and not watching the news, I have a Harry Potter sketch note, and this was done by teachwriting.org. Amanda did this, and it's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And her drawings are beyond what my sketches are. But again, it's words and then just little symbols to kind of highlight the pivotal moments in the first book. So it's just, again, a quick way where you can look and you're not going, oh, which book was that? If you had this for all 7 books, you could quickly flip through and remember what was introduced in that book and what were the most important elements. So visual images always help our brain to hold on to things with more ease. So sketch notes are a way to take advantage of the way your brain is wired and make it work more efficiently for you. All right, on to our main topic for today, and that is reading, which leads to my got books. I've got lots of books. I am definitely one of those that is lured into buying books far more than I could possibly read. And so I just grabbed a little pile here of books that I've either started to read. I've got a couple here I started and put down and forgot I was reading them. And other books that I've been meaning to read, and they're in my pile, but I don't have a plan to read them. I used to think having a pile was like a visual prompt or reminder, but what I learned is I just keep making more piles and it no longer is serving as a visual reminder. So summer has always gone hand in hand with reading for me. It's just a time that I see reading in my future. Winter does that for me as well, because I like to read by a fire and kind of like cozy up, and I see it as like a nice, comforting thing. But in the summer, I really do lean into the idea of light books more than heavy books. So I like more fiction in the summer than nonfiction, and I tend to lean into that more. But regardless of what reading you are or aren't doing, I really want to use this as a way for you to explore, if you aren't reading as much as you used to or as much as you'd like to, what would it look like if you read a little bit more, and how could you lean into that and take advantage of summer reading time? So there was a 2021 New York Times article by Jennifer Harlan, and Jennifer is quoted as saying, when the days get longer, the mercury rises and books begin to appear. Something about the dog days more than any other time of year invites readers to bury themselves in a book. It does. I always think I'm not really a big beach person. I don't like being hot. And I don't even understand how people can have like sunblock on and your hands are greasy and there's sand everywhere and you're reading. But a good paperback book, which apparently that's one of the reasons paperbacks became a thing, because you could just kind of grab it and they weren't as expensive, so they weren't as precious. And you could fold the binding back, and so they became much more of something people could grab and shove into a bag and take to the beach and read. So if that resonates with you, it's an image I have, even though I really don't do it very often. But there's research on reading that shows that we are reading less today. And they really highlighted how we're down. The average adult read over 15 books in 2016. And in 2021, just 5 years later, we're down to just over 12 books a year. So about a book a month. And depending on how much you read, you might be like, oh my gosh, I read so much more than that, or I read about that, or I don't read anything near that because I'm not reading books. And the National Endowment for the Arts published a report that they entitled Reading at Risk. And they said that less than 50% of adults read literacy, meaning that they don't read novels. You might read an article in a newspaper or a magazine or social media posts, but we're not sitting and reading a long literary work of art. We're just work. It's not a work of art. Doesn't have to be up to that caliber, but we're not reading novels. We're not sitting and really immersing ourselves into the printed word. And they're quoted as saying, literary reading in America is not only declining among all groups, but the rate of decline has accelerated, especially among the young. Reading a book requires a degree of active attention and engagement. That's the part I highlighted to share here, because those are both challenges for people with ADHD brain wiring. Everything social media is easier for your brain to get engaged with because it's quick. It gives you a little dopamine hit. You're not reading a lot. It doesn't require an investment of your sustained focus and time. It's like little snippets that we're reading. It's almost like reading a comic book or captions. We're not really diving into the immersive language of a book. So if you're noticing that this is a challenge for you as well, and maybe even a muscle that has weakened over time. That's what I noticed for myself. And I was definitely more in the 12 to 15 books a year category, which is shocking because I used to read all the time. And just slowly I noticed I was watching more TV and I was on devices more. And I just didn't have it in me to pick up an actual book. I would read a magazine article and be like, that's about all I have with me. That's all I have in me. That's all I can do. And when my kids were little, that was definitely the case. I just was lucky to get through an article in a magazine. So if you'd like to read a little bit more than you are now, I'm going to share some ADHD friendly strategies to do that. You ready?
Ready.
Do you want to read more this summer, Becca? Are you a reader?
You're actually getting me wanting to now read like at least a book a month now.
Yeah, like I want to be at least average.
I want to. I'm gonna have to go to like half price books now. And
don't you love half price books?
I
If you don't have a
do.
half price books near you, check out a local reseller. I guarantee, I know you have a used bookstore if you don't have a half price books. I love half price books.
too.
Half price books is where I used to take my kids on the last day of school every year,
Oh.
and they'd get a little bag, like a little tote bag, and they could fill it up with the books they wanted to read. Because, and then they'd have their books and they picked them out. It wasn't me saying, here, go read these. Nothing worked worse for me than you assigning me a book to read.
Right.
It's like, no, I'm not gonna read it. Never.
You told me to.
But
now
you let
I'm
me
going to.
choose my books and I get to pick what I will and will not read, then yeah, then I'm interested. All right, so I'm going to share some strategies to get excited. And that is the first strategy, get excited about reading. I can see Becca's energy is getting higher. So to create some interest, maybe ask for some recommendations. I know starting with a blank slate and having no idea what you want to read can be a no-go. Like forget it. It's going to take so much effort to pick something and I don't even know if I'm going to like it that I don't want to start. So I like to start my summer list. I have a summer reading list. I like to start it with some research. So I like to look at, what are my friends recommending? What are my family members recommending? What do my local librarians recommend? I like to look at what's the best selling books. And a lot of times I'll look for like 2020, 2021, like I'll go back a few years because if it's the best selling book right now, I won't be able to get it. It's going to, be way down on a very long wait list, or I'm going to have to buy it. And I don't really buy fiction books because I tend to read them once and that's it. I buy nonfiction. I could literally a little brain freeze there, because nonfiction, I'll write all over it. I've actually gotten nonfiction books from the library and written in them by accident and had to buy them because I forgot it wasn't mine. So I tend to just buy my nonfiction and then I borrow my fiction. But get recommendations and then just pay attention to whose books do you typically like? Because once you get a sense of, what, this person, I usually like the books they recommend, it makes it easier to take those recommendations because they like typically the same kind of books that you do. I also like to look at reviews. So even if it's a book that somebody recommends, I might go read some reviews. And for me, my minimum is they have to have a 4.5 out of 5. I don't care how many people review it. If it's like a 4.2, I'm like, it just doesn't do it. I need to be pretty sure I'm going to like a book because it is hard for me to get into them. So I know that about myself. So I really am particular about how well it's reviewed. And then I tend to look at the reviews to see what kinds of things are they saying about it without giving away the ending. I hate knowing the ending. The next is maybe join a book club if that creates interest. That has definitely sparked my interest. I love going and talking about books that I've read and getting to hear other people's perspectives on it. It just makes me enjoy the book even more after I'm done reading it. It keeps it kind of extending the experience of the book. So a book club can be a fun way to get excited and interested, and also to get ideas for what to read. And then the next might be just to plan a trip to go to your local library or go to your local bookstore and pick up, set a budget, go and get a few books so that you're starting to curate your summer book list, and then you have them on hand to start reading. Tip number 2, explore formats. So Becca, here's my full disclosure. I used to be, like, until pretty recently, a book snob. And by that, I mean, if you told me that you listened to a book on an audio, like Audible or audiobook, I was like, yeah, that doesn't count. You did not read that book. That does not count. Once I started knitting and I realized I can't hold a book and knit at the same time, I really had to start listening to more audiobooks.
Right.
And I also listen to them when I walk, when I can't, not on my treadmill, but just going outside and walking. And so I really have had to step back and shift my belief about that and realize any way that you consume a book is better than not consuming a book. So whether it's audio or an ebook, which I do as well. I cannot read nonfiction on an ebook, but I can read light fiction. So again, it's very individual, but I encourage you to experiment. I tried to read Oprah's new book club pick, The Covenant of Water. I feel like I'm saying that wrong.
How is it?
It was really good, except I tried to read it in ebook format because they didn't have a physical book and it was a long wait list. But the ebook was available. So like, oh, I'm going to get the ebook. And it's a really, for me, it's a very detailed and lots of things going on. I had a really hard time keeping up with it in an ebook. And that was an interesting thing for me to notice where I was like, I can't do this. I felt like I don't even know where I am in the book because it would skip back and forth and I couldn't easily flip back and see, wait, who did they talk about before? I need it in a physical book.
Right.
So I put that one down, or I returned it, I should say. And I am waiting until I can get the physical book because apparently I need to read very light, easy, or I reread books in ebook format. So I read Harry Potter a lot, or like the Hunger Games and things that don't require me to have to kind of hold on to all of that information. I already know it because I've already read it before. So light books for me with ebooks. But again, explore a different format if reading a physical book doesn't work for you. Oh, and then I wanted to share, if you do read ebooks, I highly recommend, I've used Kindle. I haven't, have you ever done Nook?
No, I've just done the Kindle.
Okay. I pretty much, I mean, I know the Nook is pretty much the same thing through Barnes and Noble, but I've used Kindle. And then what I really use, I don't even use Kindle anymore. I just read through my Libby app on my phone, which is connected to my library. So I borrow books for free. They go back automatically. There's no worry about it being late. It all happens
So you watch it on
seamlessly.
your phone.
I read it on my phone. Yep, exactly. Yeah. And really, I only read on my phone at night because I don't want to have a light on and I just fall asleep and it goes away.
Put it away.
And then if I'm traveling, I like to have it so it's not taking up more space in my suitcase. It took me a long time to learn how to read an ebook. I was very resistant to that too. But again, now that I've just stepped out of my comfort zone a little bit and tried them both enough, I now know what I like to read over those different formats. So I encourage you just to try, if you know that you just can't sit and read a book, maybe you can walk or, do some chores while listening to a book. Try out different format. Okay, number 3, accountability. If accountability works for you, if you're trying to reconnect to reading, maybe you share your list with somebody else. Not if it feels too restrictive. So I would say, like, if you share your list and somebody's gonna be like, hey, I made this list, I don't see you reading. That's not helpful. But if it's, somebody's like, oh, I can't wait to hear about this book. I'm going to read this one. You tell me how you like that one, and then we'll share notes or something. Again, joining a book club can help with accountability. I won't go to my book club meeting if I haven't at least given a really good try of reading the book. There was one book I didn't finish reading, but I really did try. I just didn't like it at all. And I think next month's book might be like that. It's about time travel. I'm not a big time travel I don't know why I find that that doesn't work for my brain, but I'm going to try it because it's the book club. So if that holds you accountable with more ease, I invite you to explore that. And then the other is libraries, bookstores have summer reading programs. If incentivizing it works, they even have adult. I remember
With the t-shirt.
yeah, they give you different things. My library, and I don't know if they're doing it this summer, but they would give out like a little $5 Starbucks gift card if you read so many minutes or so many books. So even for adults, they have some incentives sometimes. So I invite you to check it out, but especially if you have kids, it can really help to kind of draw you into going to the library and revisiting and staying connected to your intention to read. Next up is structure. So if you do have a family or you have a partner that you're both trying to read, maybe making specific reading time a thing. So carving out the time. I know we had family reading time where I would either read aloud a chapter from a book every day, or we would all read our own books at that time, but there was no devices, no electronics, just reading time. I shared earlier at the top of my celebration, the structure I created for coffee and books in the morning instead of news. So that structure, I don't have to think about and decide, oh, I'm trying to read today. What am I going to read? I just read when I'm having my coffee because I carved out that time and I made it part of my routine. If you want to listen to a book when you exercise, that could be the thing that you do. You read this book every time, you listen to the book every time you're exercising, whether you're walking or working out in the gym, that you can listen to it at the same time. It might also help to structure the list itself. Like I said, it can be really hard to pick what you're going to read. So I love a series for that. So if you like the first one, you automatically want to find out what happens next. So you get the next one. But having a list to pull from. So every time you put a book down, you don't have to then, what am I going to read next? I don't know about you, or is that hard for you? That's like impossible for me. That's what gets me to stop reading.
What?
Not having another book lined up.
Oh yeah, because then it's like, what am I going to do after the fact?
Yeah. And then I have to decide. I have to think about, what do I want to read next?
Because you really want that. Yeah, you want to be interested.
Yeah,
in
I want
it.
to like put a book down and be like, oh, next up,
So-
and just grab it. Yes. I don't want to have to be like, what was I thinking about reading? So that leads to my next strategy, and that's, how do you keep up with your reading? So I'm going to highlight some book tracking apps. Do you read, or you ever used an app to keep up with what you're reading?
Not used an app, but just doing certain reading programs, and I have done a book club before.
Mhm.
So like just knowing like, oh, I have a meeting coming up, I got to get those chapters done.
Yes.
But again, if you like the book, you're wanting to continue reading it and you don't want to put it down. That's usually what you want. Don't you?
Yes. Well, in a book tracking app, the ones that I'm talking about, it's not Libby or like Apple Books where you're buying the books on that platform to read them. I'm talking about more, it's keeping track of the books that you have finished or the ones that you want to read next. And so the ones that I, just before recording this, looked up to see what the top ones were. Most of them are free, but some of them might charge depending on the level of what kind of features you want to be able to access. But Goodreads has one, Booklist, Bookshelf, and Bookly. I use Booklist, and I love it because you can scan the barcode and it will automatically pull up a picture of the book. I'm very visual, so I can remember the book by the picture. I never hardly ever remember the author, but I'll remember the picture even more than the title. I'll be like, I don't know, it was blue and it had red writing. Like I can remember details like that, but I can't always remember what it was called. But it lets me mark it as finished reading. So like I'm in the, like I have like 7 or 8 books that I'm currently reading apparently. And then, but then I don't forget that I was actually reading it. And then it has to read. So books that I want to read, I'll add to the list. So I remember, and I can go look at that when I finish a book. I'm like, what do I want to read next? Oh, let me go look at my list. So it just holds all of those lists in there. And I don't have any trouble keeping up with going in and marking it finished because it feels like a celebration because it moves it from reading to finished.
Oh, nice.
And then I can look. So right now I have 24 books so far in 2023 in my finished tab. I know.
Hey.
I know. And so that takes me to the other strategy, which is just a physical list.
Mhm.
So if you want to keep up with your reading just by making a list, this is my list so far, my 23 and 23 list, which now has 24. And so that's led me to make a summer reading list. Now, I've shared in a previous podcast that I have had as many as 30 books on my summer reading list. That might be very doable to some people, not this person. And I realized there wasn't enough time unless I was going to read full time to get all of those read. So I try to make a more manageable list, but I don't use this as a, you have to read the books on this list, because that would feel like an expectation and then it's not fun and sparkly, but it is a jumping off point. So right now, these are all very sparkly to me and I picture myself reading them, but I also know I have a book club meeting tonight. I might hear about a new sparkly book that might bump one of these off the list, and I'm okay with that. I'm very flexible, especially with my summer reading. I want it to all be, I can't wait to read that, not, oh, I really do need to get around to reading that. So all of these, I think, with the exception of one, are fiction, which is I usually read about 50% fiction, 50% nonfiction, but these are all fiction. So I'm just going to show you the top. I'm reading the 3 Harry Potter illustrated by Jim Kay that I have. And I'm just so excited because usually I read 1 Harry Potter a summer, and I'm now going to read at least 5 is my intention. And I'm about halfway done book 3. So I'm super excited. I still have the Covenant of Water on there because
Waiting for the physical copy.
I'm waiting for the physical copy, but I'm like 22nd on the list. So we'll see. I don't know how long that's going to take, but I am interested in noticing if I like it more in the physical format as opposed to the e-format, which I was really frustrated with and literally felt stupid. Going, who are they? What was that? Like, I was very lost. So those are just some strategies to try to come at your summer reading with an ADHD lens. And remember, if you are trying to get back into reading, or if you've never really had a good reading practice, but you like the idea of it, or you're like, you know what, this is the summer, I think I'm going to read more. Keep it ADHD friendly by making it doable. So if you want to be like, I want to read a book a week, that's great. But maybe you start by, I'm going to read a chapter a day. If a chapter a day is too much, maybe you read 1 page a day. If you read 1 page every single day, you will finish a book. But if you have a goal that's too big and it shuts you down, you're just going to stop, because that's what we do. So I want to make sure that you carve out something that works for you. I have clients that will literally like set a 5-minute timer, and they're like, I'm going to reach the timer goes off and then I'm done and I'm not reading anymore. Whatever gets you into it. And one other thing I don't think I shared, and I hope I'm not making this too long, but this is another thing I found really works for me. If I have a hard time getting into a book, sometimes I'll get the audio and I'll listen to the first chapter and then I can pick it up and keep reading. But sometimes the reading does take more effort than I can give to it if it's a difficult book. And I'm on the request for the audio version of the Covenant of Water too, because I'm also wondering if that would be easier to listen to than to read, to get into the story itself, so it's not as frustrating to me. So I just want to share that strategy, because sometimes trying a different format can help to break through whatever barrier you're having when you're trying to read something. All right, so I want to end with a quote, and this came from the 1907. More than 100 years ago, book review. This is from Hildegarde Hawthorne. You don't hear that name much anymore, do you? Hildegarde. I'm sure she went by Hildy, right? So this is what Hildy said. She said, the true pleasure of summer reading lies not so much in the novel itself, but in the choice to devote oneself to it. Oh, I love that. So I have chosen to devote myself to my reading list, or at least to start from that reading list and see where else I might pick something else up and add to it. But I just want to throw in the possibility of an ADHD friendly reading summer. And I won't hear if, oh, that was loud. I will have to see back if you need to edit that sound out. It was just a piece of paper. If you do try some of these strategies to read more this summer, I would love to hear if you post in the comments. Reach out at info@adhdfriendly.com. Would love to hear what you do to support yourself or your family to read more this summer. All right, time for recaps. So we kicked off with a celebration around reading more that came from putting a boundary for no news in the morning. And that really has opened up the gateway to having more time to read. I'm just loving it so much. And then I shared the sketch notes strategy to support remembering more of what you read, and how you can just create some icons to represent different images to connect to what you're reading more easily, because the pictures will connect in your brain to what you're trying to remember more than just words by themselves. So sketch notes as a strategy. Again, if you try that out, I'd love to hear it. And the main topic, summer reading. Got books? I hope you do. Next week, Becca, it's time for an announcement. A big announcement. I'm not going to say anything more. Just that it's a big announcement for ADHD Friendly. So I hope you'll come back next week, and I hope we don't lose subscribers. So if you pay attention to my subscriber number, we're down a couple, but that's okay. not about the number, really about trying to share ADHD friendly strategies. And I'd much rather have a lower number, but be sharing something that's helpful, that resonates and that you can take and use. If it doesn't resonate, let me know, but also give yourself permission to let it go. Hold on to what works, let go of what doesn't. That's always our mantra here at ADHD Friendly. And if we're putting out, I hope, good content, then regardless of what the number shows, we're going to feel good about what we're doing. So again, if you need more support and you want to check out some more free resources as well as other options, check out my website, adhdfriendly.com. And as always, until next time, tally ho.